Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I think it was last week that somebody mentioned that they hope that near future talks may address how we use our practice to cope with difficult times. Hopefully, I may be able to offer something in this talk that can assist or act perhaps as a stepping stone to something that might be of use. First, I wanted to discuss attachment. It seems to me that teaching Zen suffers because there are no words that can accurately convey the meaning of what we're trying to teach. We can justify this by saying wise phrases like, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. True, but not necessarily very helpful, since words are what we have to work with when we teach. So in struggling to convey the deep truths of Zen teachings, we adopt words and phrases like emptiness or void, enlightenment, attachment. And when it comes to emptiness or void, I find these terms can cause more confusion than clarity, since we are not really talking about perceivable universe being empty as such or a void. For this reason, I tend to prefer perhaps nothingness, since at least we can re-emphasize the syllables and say no thingness, which gets closer to what we're trying to talk about here than many of the other terms. Same for enlightenment, which is a relatively modern term that suggests something to be achieved by Zen practice. But in fact, there's nothing to achieve, as we are often taught. So enlightenment can actually be a rather misleading term. Awakening may be a better term, and it's often the one that we use, but we can still get into a tangle of weeds when we say that you need to awaken to the fact you're already awake, you just don't realize it. And, in no time at all, Zen terms start taking us down rabbit holes that we can then have trouble getting back out of. But when it comes to attachment, I think again the term doesn't evoke what the Buddha was talking about. It leads to discussions where people are tempted to say, for instance, well, there are good attachments and bad attachments, and it's the bad attachments we're trying to give up. But no, that's not what he taught. It was all attachments that need to be abandoned in order to eliminate suffering. And the problem, as with other terms, is that this English word attachment, while a better fit than many of the others, it may in many ways be more confusing than helpful. The Sing Sing Ming puts it in terms of preferences. The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. And here the term preference is at the same time both more helpful and less helpful than the term attachment, in my opinion. Huang Po put it down with both hands, signifying the act of complete surrender and letting go of all attachments. And some say, well, surely he meant to let go with both hands of all the bad attachments. No, actually he meant to let go of all attachments, all preferences. So what about my attachment to people I love, or food that I'm fond of, or people I'm fond of, or pets I'm fond of? What about my preferences for chocolate ice cream, or for people's safety and protection? Am I being asked to give out literally all attachments, all preferences? Yes and no. Because the issue here is the words that what we're trying to convey with the word attachment or the word preferences as they're commonly used, and as all the associations and connotations of those words when we speak them. And here I'm going to go off of my original talk that I planned and do a little an attempt to recall the way that Bernie Glassman presented this topic in a talk I attended with him several decades before his death. And apologies, Bernie, I'm probably going to mess this up. But anyway, he said something along these lines. He said, am I attached to my left arm? This arm, am I attached to it? Well, in the concrete world of the relative, of course I'm attached to it. It's physically attached to the body that I call Tim's body, and I call my body, and other people call Tim's body. To say I'm not attached to it would be to imply it's floating in space somewhere. I've got no control over it. It does whatever it wants to. And of course, if you fall asleep on your arm and lose sensation in it, you'll get some feel for what it means to have that arm not feel like it's part of your body. But am I attached to it emotionally? Would I miss it if it was gone? Well, yes, of course I would. Um, that goes without saying. There's a whole host of things that I couldn't do if I didn't have this arm. I'm very happy to have it, and in that sense, I'm attached to it. But am I attached to it in the sense that Buddha is talking about attachments? Well, no. I'm no more attached to it than I am attached to this being a coffee cup with coffee in it. They're all just concepts. They're all just delusions that we've made up. Sometimes very useful delusions, but they're not real in the absolute sense. They're real in the relative sense. Both are real, both are not real. As I said, this use of words in Zen gets very confusing. So put another way, when I say words like attachment and preference, the meanings and connotations that come up for us, I would propose are not what the Buddha meant, not what the Sing Sing Ming was referring to, not what Pang Po was talking about. So what were they talking about, and can we identify better words to use? As to better words, I personally haven't found any, but if anyone has suggestions, I'd really love to hear them. What I will try, and you're all going to be part of an experiment here, is a method that may give some insight into what is really meant by the use of terms like attachment or preferences in the sense of Buddhist teaching, Zen teaching. So here we go. Is this going to be part of a little experiment? I'm going to read some facts, and I'm going to err on the side of reading a fairly long list of them in the hope that there's at least one of them that you will disagree with me about, and ideally at least one where you're saying in your head, at least, and hopefully not out loud, I'm pretty sure Tim's wrong on that one. We can discuss it in the discussions later if you really have an issue with any of these. But I have fact-checked them all, and I didn't just use Wikipedia. So here they go. In the novels, Sherlock Holmes never says elementary, my dear Watson. Darker roast coffee typically has less caffeine than lighter roast coffee. The popular red phone as a hotline between Washington and Moscow never existed and doesn't exist. The minute waltz is pronounced wrongly and it should be the minute waltz. Nowhere in the Bible is there mention of three kings visiting the baby Jesus, or of their names being Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. Similarly, the seven deadly sins are not mentioned in the Bible. And again, the fruit, the forbidden fruit in Genesis and the Garden of Eden, is not an apple. Napoleon Bonaparte was not short. The 1871 Chicago fire was not started by Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over a lantern. Hang, Velcro, and space pens were not spin-offs from the space program. The sun isn't yellow. Nowhere in the Star Wars movies does Darth Vader say, "Luke, I am your father." There was never a 1990s movie called Shazam, starring the comedian Sinbad as the genie. Nowhere in the Star Trek episodes does Captain Kirk ever say, "Beam me up, Scotty." Nowhere in the movie Forrest Gump does Forrest say, "My mama always said life is like a box of chocolates." There is no dark side of the moon. So, as part of this experiment, I'll ask you to consider which of those stuck out to you most. Which one is kind of like okay, that one I'm pretty sure is wrong, or some such reaction like that. But in this moment, accept that what I'm saying that it is true. Observe how that makes you feel about the prior fact that you believed. Perhaps it might be a little like a rug being pulled from beneath you. Maybe it makes you feel now you're not quite so sure you can trust anything you think you know. Actually, from a Zen perspective, that might not be a bad thing. Maybe you feel something like, even if Tim's right, I'm still going to believe it because I believed it for as long as I can remember. Isn't it rather like that clinging sensation you get when you remove some plastic from around the top of a pill bottle or something like that, or maybe a bowl of uh, you know salad dressing or something, and static electricity causes that little piece of plastic to cling to you. You try and shake it off in the trash basket, and it won't come off. Or perhaps it's like when someone says, "Don't think of an elephant." And now all you can do is picture an elephant despite not wanting to. Or maybe it's like when you get a tune stuck in your head, an advertisement jingle perhaps, and it just won't go away. An earworm, we call them. It clings to you more than you are in any sense actively clinging to it, like a burr that sticks in your clothing when you go for a walk in the woods. It attaches to you rather than you attaching to it, but you're still attached. This is like the attachment Buddha taught about. In a sense, all these examples I gave you are like societal falsehoods, false facts that have been repeated so often that they are true, as if they are true, that they've in a sense become true in society, even though objectively they're not true. When I was testing this talk out with a few people over the past few weeks, some even said to me, well, Tim, even if it isn't technically true, it's become true through tradition. Now consider this coffee mug that I've often used to illustrate the absolute and the relative. This too has become true through tradition. The color blue, the concept of what a coffee mug is, blue, white, gold, those colors, the shape, the form, its function, all societally agreed, not real, real in a sense in the relative, real in the sense that we have to be able to use these so-called real facts about separate objects as if they were separate objects, as if they were actually objects. But none, in a very real sense, in the absolute sense, none of this is really true. There's no such thing as blue. There's no such thing as a coffee cup, other than in our minds, which creates the delusion that makes it true. Again, true in the relative, not true in the absolute. Both true and not true at the same time. And both, if we're going to get into Indian philosophy, both not true and both definitely true, definitely true. We'll go down that rabbit hole another time. Okay, that all sounds very good in a technical and almost hypothetical way, but how does this help me in everyday life? Life which at times, particularly recently, has been difficult to live through. And some of you will recall the beavers I spoke about in my prior talk, the ones who build dams that get in the way of our flow through our day smoothly as if carried by the current of the river of life just as it is. The dams whose builds of our thoughts about what happened in the past or our stress over what we anticipate will happen in the future. These dams also include all our constructs and conceptions about what we believe we know, what we believe to be real, what we believe reality to be. To what extent does telling me that it's all made up in the mind, all delusion, actually help me in my everyday moment-to-moment life? That can be a struggle at times. Some might say the simple answer is it can't, or to the extent it can, it's an intellectual appreciation that may translate into helping me cope somewhat better, but not necessarily a practice I can use in my daily life that is going to benefit how well I cope, how resilient I am, or how much equanimity I experience. Similarly, how does saying give up attachments help me? Sometimes being asked to put it all down with both hands helps. In other times of great stress, it may make things a whole lot worse. So what to do? Well, first, what it isn't. It isn't about eliminating all your concepts and preconceptions and so on, eliminating all thought, eliminating all preferences, even if in the sense we normally use, or eliminating attachments in the sense that that word is often colloquially used. Even if we could do that, it would lead to what I call zombie Zen, sitting on cloud nine, smiling all the time, totally not caring about anyone or anything. In other words, I would say the very opposite of what Zen teaches. It also isn't about giving up attachments in the usual everyday way of speaking of attachments. Everything is attached to everything else. As cliched as it may sound, we are one, and the appearance of reality being separate, that we're separate beings living in a world full of separate objects and separate and other separate beings and separate uh, you know colors, emotions, sounds, and so forth is all an illusion. Buddhist teaching tells us this is the delusion that is samsara. What dropping attachments with both hands does not mean is becoming detached or disconnecting with others. That way, again, lies zombie Zen, a game featuring quietism and nihilism. Rather, the Zen way is a way of compassion and caring for others and for ourselves, with a full realization of our interconnectedness. Pure love, pure compassion is by definition unselfish, an unselfish caring, one devoid of ego, and one that is unattached in that there is no attachment to outcome. It is inherently deep attachment that recognizes we're all interconnected, where the connections are held deeply, but in a sense lightly, without clinging. There's a parallel here, I think, to the comparison between compassion and empathy. In empathy, we put ourselves in the place of another and use our memories, experiences, and emotions to essentially say, I know how you feel because I felt too. I feel too. A worthy quality, but one that ultimately involves the ego, projection of your perceived self and your experience or imagined concepts and preconceptions about what the other person is experiencing. Compassion, by contrast, is pure awareness, fully being present in the moment for the other person, a deep connection, while not, in the usual sense of the term, forming attachment. But you're not disconnected. On the contrary, compassionate awareness is the most connected awareness you could possibly have, but you're not disconnected. And if that sounds a little like double talk, welcome to the world of Zen and now trying to use English language to talk about it. So what can a practical approach to coping better be, increasing resilience and increasing equanimity? Is there any panacea that Zen can offer us, the proven practice that will always help us cope cope better, increase our resilience, increase our equanimity? And the answer is yes. And it shouldn't surprise us, since at the core of Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which basically says, follow this prescriptive formula, and all suffering will cease. Another way of phrasing this, and it was the way favored by some of the most admired Zen masters over the centuries, is the cultivation of great doubt. Any practice that helps us cultivate great doubt, cultivate don't know mind or beginner's mind, is a practice that has the potential to lead to awakening, which in turn is going to benefit not just you, but all beings, and lead to improving the ability to cope, be resilient, and have equanimity. I may not always say it, but all Zen practice has the goalless goal of encouraging great doubt, whether it's Zazen, koan work, listening to Dharma talks, or reading texts, and so on. While it's been touched on by others in prior talks, there's one other method that was in many ways devised to help we regular folk who are not holed up in a monastery, namely what is called Wado practice, sometimes known as Wato in Japanese pronunciation. So let's quickly review what Wado practice is and how we can use it in everyday life. It has one purpose, and that is to encourage great doubt, encourage awakening through promoting beginner's mind. You may have heard the story that Wado was invented by a Chinese master named Da Hui. The way some tell the story is that having already been personally persuaded that sitting on a cushion facing a wall was unlikely to provide moments of awakening, he also became disenchanted with how the koan practice of his Linji lineage was working out. His students, he felt, were treating koans like rote learning, and he felt that koans were no longer provoking great doubt in the ways that they had perhaps done in the past. So, legend has it, he destroyed his copies of the Blue Cliff Record of Zen koans, and, if we're to believe the stories, he also destroyed everyone else's copies of it, along with all the wood blocks used to print the Blue Cliff. Frankly, I find that hard to believe, but it's legend, so let's just roll with it. In the place of koans, he invented these short phrases that act like mini koans. The term Wado or Wato, spelled Huatou in simplified Chinese, literally means word head or head of speech, or more fun, point beyond which speech exhausts itself. But what perhaps gets lost or gets less press is the fact that Da Hui had a sizable part of his practice focus on lay students. And we know this because of the extensive body of letters he exchanged with such students, and we can still read them today. In fact, nearly everything we know about Da Hui's teaching was from this body of work with lay people like you and like me. He even says that he assigns practices according to individual needs of the person, rather like prescribing medicine, and he likens it to prescribing medicine. He even condescends and says that in some cases he might even prescribe sitting on a cushion and meditating. I think he had a wicked sense of humor personally. But more often, he prescribed these Wado to his lay uh, students. And it's clear that he felt this format, this kind of abbreviated koan, is something that can be used by the lay person throughout their person's working day, their life, their everyday life, moment to moment. And it's far more suited in his mind as a practice than monastic style practice, which is how he saw sitting on a cushion in Zendos for hours on end. Now, I've heard many misinterpretations of what Wado are. Some people, for instance, have told me, oh, yes, I do Wado. My Wado is peace, or my Wado is all is one. And I repeat it to myself all day long. No, that's not Wado. Wado is not a chant practice or a form of meditation that requires word repetition, like transcendental meditation and so on. Wado will always be in the form of a question, like, who am I? Or what is this? Or who is carrying this skin sack around? Or if you come from a tradition of chanting the Buddha's name, Pure Land tradition, so forth, then the Wado might be who is repeating the Buddha's name. And the reason they're in this form, this question form, is because its primary intent is to encourage great doubt, which won't happen if there's not a question. The story I heard many years ago, which I'm very fond of, so I'll cling to it whether it's true or not, is that Korean master Sun Sang was having a long drive from Los Angeles to San Francisco. A student of his was driving, he was sitting in the front passenger seat, and there was another student in the back seat. And the student in the rear was repeating out loud over and over again, what's this? Don't know. What's this? Don't know. A Wado that Sun Sun often recommended his students to use, and I myself was recommended to use it as the primary one, indeed, probably the sole one. Allegedly, after about an hour of driving, with a student in the rear still repeating the phrase out loud, Sun San turned around to the student, gently placed his hand on the student's knee, and said, that's not how it's done. Whereupon he turned back round to face the road again and didn't speak again for the rest of the 4 or 5 hours remaining of the drive. So what is the correct way? First, Wado is not spoken out loud. It's not said, I'm not saying that nobody anywhere recommends Wado being spoken out loud, because I'm coming to realize there are as many versions of teaching Wado as there are people teaching it. But in the primarily Chinese Chan traditions that still particularly carry it on today, and Korean Zen is very much a spin-off of the Linji Chinese tradition, Wado is repeated silently. Most contemporary Chan teachers I know say, and indeed, I think it's true of many of the Korean Zen teachers too, say don't start your Wado practice until you have a deep foundation in your sitting practice. And whilst this may not be authentic to Da Hui's original methods, I do encourage you to feel grounded in your sitting meditation before trying Wado. And there are a few popular options open to you. One is to introduce the period of your sitting practice where you repeat the Wado slowly and deliberately in your head for a period of time, say 10 minutes. The other option is more how Da Hui saw it being used in everyday life. During the day, selecting a period in which you'll be repeating to yourself your Wado silently over and again, say for about 30 minutes, until you become very skilled with Wado. It's advisable not to be doing this repetition whilst concurrently doing something like driving a car, operating factory machinery, or carrying out brain surgery. The trick with Wado is to bear in mind at all times that you're not trying to solve the Wado intellectually. You're not trying to answer the question in the Wado with your intellect. Similarly, you're not chanting the words to yourself so lightly held that the Wado has no chance to work on promoting great doubt. So you're not holding the Wado too lightly or too tightly. One way to approach the practice is to see the potential of your subconscious to respond to the Wado by generating great doubt. And to achieve the question needs to be asked with serious intention, but without the intent to respond. and not such that it becomes like a mindless chant aimed to calm you down, as other mantra practices might do. I believe Dahui, Sun San, and even my lineage teacher Matsuoka Roshi were all known for saying, with great doubt, great awakening. With small doubt, small awakening. Great awakening is the cessation of suffering, the presence of great resilience, great equanimity, and great ability to cope. But in times of great stress, maybe even a small boost in resilience, equanimity, and our ability to cope would be most welcome. So bring on those small doubts if that's what it is going to take. And maybe this will be the result if you try this Wado practice. Interested to know then what your feelings are about all this, whether you want to push back at me about the facts I gave you. Maybe you want to tell me about your own experience of Wado. Maybe you've tried